Welcome to the Bela Infidelity Stories channel, a place where we unveil genuine tales filled with surprising turns. If you found the video enjoyable, please consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up. It truly supports the growth of our channel. Now, let's immerse ourselves in the narrative. I have always held the conviction that diligent effort is the cornerstone of achievement. If I exerted double the effort compared to others, if I challenged myself beyond my boundaries, then in time success would be within my reach. I wasn't aiming to demonstrate it to everyone, just to a select few. To begin with, my parents. I longed for them to gaze at me and declare, "That's our son, he's accomplished something significant." Next, me. I had to hold on to the idea that every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment I chose hard work over enjoyment, it all had to carry significance. And lastly, my wife. I aspired to be the kind of partner she could depend on, someone she would take pride in. Yet existence doesn't consistently acknowledge hard work. Initially, it seemed like a small hurdle. I've experienced a job loss. It's not a problem. I had another one on hand. Yet, that one slipped away from me as well. I reassured myself that it was just a phase. I will discover something new shortly. Then my well-being suffered a setback. Nothing too severe, just enough to hinder my progress, making recovery a bit more challenging. And when you pause your relentless pace, that's when all that you've been avoiding comes rushing in. The fatigue, the uncertainty, the subtle whisper in your thoughts that questions whether you truly measure up. And then, the ultimate strike arrived. My wife departed. She kept her composure and didn't draw much attention to herself. No yelling, no theatrical departure. She just expressed that she could no longer continue with this. With her bags in hand, she stepped through the door, leaving everything behind without a second glance. I recall sitting there after she departed, gazing at the vacant spot where her belongings once resided. It was as if a piece of my essence had been torn from me, yet rather than experiencing anguish, I was enveloped in an emptiness. I ceased my efforts. Time seemed to meld into one another. I hardly stepped outside the apartment. I hardly consumed any food. The only companions I had were the sporadic sip of beer and the distant murmur of the television filling the air. I wasn't exactly paying attention. It was merely a cacophony, a way to occupy the stillness. Then one evening, my phone vibrated with a notification. I nearly overlooked it. Lately, the majority of messages I've received have been nothing more than reminders for overdue bills or unwanted spam. However, as I looked at the screen, a name appeared that took me by surprise. Elegance. It had been months since I last spoke to her. She was an acquaintance of my mom's, though acquaintance wasn't exactly the right word. They weren't exactly inseparable friends from their early years or anything of that sort. They collaborated and maintained a pleasant rapport, enjoying coffee together from time to time. I had encountered Grace a few times at my mother's home. Familiar enough to acknowledge her presence, yet lacking the depth to truly understand her essence. She has always given off the impression of being a genuinely kind individual, cozy, intelligent, appealing, in that natural manner that certain women possess. Yet she was merely a friend of my mother. Her message was brief. "Hello, would you like to get together?" I gazed at it for an extended period. I wasn't feeling sociable. I found myself lacking any real inclination for anything, to be honest. I chose not to reply. 3 days went by. Suddenly there was a knock at my door. I nearly chose not to respond. I didn't anticipate anyone showing up. Yet, something stirred within me. Perhaps it was curiosity or simply a desire to escape the routine that compelled me to rise. As I swung the door wide, she stood there, unmistakably present. Elegance. She stood there, 2 cups of coffee in hand, gazing at me with an understanding that pierced through the chaos of my life, yet her expression held no hint of judgment. Her presence was a complete mystery to me. Yet after what felt like an eternity, I experienced a sensation beyond mere numbness. I lingered in the doorway, gazing at Grace as if she were an elusive vision. I must have appeared quite disheveled, unshaven, wearing an old t-shirt that likely hadn't been washed in weeks. The air in my apartment was thick with the scent of old beer and leftover takeout, and I had a feeling I might carry the same aroma. I was caught off guard by the unexpected arrival of guests. Honestly, I hardly anticipated being able to get through most days. She remained unyielding. She simply extended one of the coffee cups. I was uncertain whether she still enjoyed black coffee, yet I decided to take a chance. Her voice was composed, unwavering, as if she remained unfazed by the chaos I had turned into. I paused, casting a fleeting look at the cup. It came from the delightful coffee shop, not the low-quality gas station brew I had been relying on when I felt the need for coffee at all. "What brings you here?" I inquired, rather than just taking it. Since I happened to be nearby, she remarked with a casual tone, "I assumed you might not be brewing fresh coffee for yourself lately." She had a point, but that didn't imply I was in the mood for companionship. I took a quick look into my apartment. The scene was in complete disarray, garments heaped in the corner. Abandoned beer bottles litter the counter. A pizza box that I was fairly certain had been lingering since last week. Entering here may lead to some second thoughts. She offered a faint smile. I'm willing to embrace the uncertainty. I exhaled softly and moved to the side, allowing her to enter. Grace entered, the sound of her heels softly echoing against the floor. She surveyed her surroundings, yet chose not to remark on the disarray. She settled onto the couch with an air of familiarity, as though she carried no demands. I found myself seated opposite her, a lingering uncertainty clouding my thoughts about her presence. It had been a long time since I last saw her. I hardly knew her at all. She was a friend of my mother, a familiar face from a handful of family gatherings, a person I exchanged brief conversations with perhaps once or twice. At last, I cradled the coffee, my fingers embracing the comforting warmth of the cup. I ought to have urged her to go, yet there was a part of me that held back. "What's going on here?" I finally inquired. She paused to savor her coffee before responding. "Your mother is concerned about your well-being." "Absolutely." My mother. I ought to have anticipated that. It seems she sent Grace to see how I was doing, since I wasn't picking up her calls. I exhaled softly. Let her know that I'm doing well. Grace cast a glance my way. "Oscar, you don't seem well." I lacked the vigor to engage in a dispute. "I understand where you're coming from." She requested that you look in on me, and you're truly being a supportive companion. Your contribution has been made. You can inform her that I'm still alive and kicking. I anticipated that she would rise, perhaps let out a sigh of relief for having fulfilled her obligation, yet she remained still. Instead, she reclined and elegantly crossed her legs. "That's not my purpose for being here." I scowled. "So, what brings you here?" She savored another sip of coffee, weighing her words carefully. "Because I understand the feeling of watching everything crumble around you." That took me by surprise. I was completely unaware of her life story. To me, she was simply my mom's friend, someone who seemed to have everything in order. She appeared to be the type of woman who consistently maintained a firm grip on everything around her. "What about you?" I let out a derisive laugh. "I find it hard to believe that you've ever truly faced the depths of despair." Grace inclined her head just a bit. "It seems you might not have a complete understanding of who I am." She remained open and receptive. She had no intention of demonstrating anything. She was merely presenting a truth. After a long stretch, I finally experienced a sensation beyond mere fatigue. Inquisitiveness. What transpired? I found myself pondering. Grace let out a breath. Separation. Obligation. A journey I undertook to reconstruct my professional path from the ground up. For a solid 2 years, each morning began with the same haunting question: would anything ever return to a sense of normalcy? That silenced me. Her presence wasn't merely a result of compassion. She comprehended. For the first time, in months, I felt a sense of connection, as if I wasn't the only one experiencing the collapse of my world. We lingered in quietude for a brief moment. Then, before I could hold back, I confessed, I have no idea how to resolve this. Grace nodded, as if she had been anticipating my words all along. There's no need to resolve everything immediately. Beginning is all that truly matters. I released a laugh devoid of humor. So, where should I begin? She placed her coffee on the table. First step, enjoy a refreshing shower. Second step, wear fresh attire. Now, let's move on to step 3. She gestured towards the heap of garbage beside the sofa. Perhaps tidy up this space a bit. I nearly chuckled, not due to its humor, but rather its sheer simplicity, quite easy to handle. I anticipated that she would provide me with profound, transformative insights. Instead, she simply offered me 3 small actions I could take, and in some way, that instilled a sense of possibility. I surveyed the apartment with a careful eye. The chaos I had overlooked for weeks, the vacant beer bottles, the neglected dishes. I let out a breath. All right, let's begin with the first step. Grace beamed. Excellent decision. I will return tomorrow to review step 3. Excuse me, what did you just say? I stared at her in disbelief. So, you're returning? Absolutely. She rose, smoothing her coat into place. I wouldn't want you to lose your focus. I gazed at her, attempting to discern whether she was being serious. Yet she was not. She had a determined demeanor. I was completely baffled by her concern. What was her motivation for this action? For the first time in months, a glimmer of hope flickered within me, suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, I wasn't entirely alone. With the door closing softly behind her, I remained seated, my gaze fixed on the coffee that had yet to be sipped. After a moment, I rose to my feet and stepped into the shower. The following morning, I arose with a sense of change within me. Not improved, not resolved by mere chance, simply distinct. A thought had taken root in my mind. A faint whisper nudging me, reminding me that there was someone counting on me to accomplish something today. It may not have been significant, but it was certainly more than I had experienced in quite some time. I propped myself up gradually, my hands gliding over my features. The apartment appeared unchanged. Another chaotic situation, identical vacant beer bottles. The familiar heap of garments remains in the corner. However, I had taken a shower the previous night. That was quite an experience. I cast a fleeting look at my phone. There are no missed calls, no messages available. Only quietude. That once brought a sense of comfort. No one is disturbing me. No one is requesting anything. Yet today, the stillness seemed more oppressive. Then, just past midday, there came a knock at the door. I paused, caught in a moment of uncertainty. A part of me had anticipated that Grace would move on and leave me behind, to continue with her day and never return. Yet, there she stood. I swung the door wide. She scanned me briefly, her gaze darting to my tidy t-shirt and jeans. So, have you completed step 2? I gazed at my reflection, a hint of astonishment washing over me. This morning, I found myself dressed in fresh clothes. I hadn't even considered it, yet I had accomplished it. Indeed, I murmured. Grace beamed as if I had just shared the news of completing a marathon. Excellent. I've prepared lunch. Eyes widened as I took in the bag she clutched tightly. What is the reason? Because your eating habits might not be the best. She entered uninvited, placing the bag on the counter with a decisive motion, and because dining solo is no fun. She was right. These days my meals mainly revolve around whatever is the simplest option: convenient meals, quick bites, treats from the convenience store. For quite some time, genuine nourishment had taken a back seat. I observed her as she revealed 2 sandwiches and a pair of iced teas. It was an entirely ordinary occurrence. It felt as if we were merely colleagues sharing a moment during our lunch hour, as if she hadn't discovered me in utter disarray just the day before. We gathered at the quaint table beside the window. I savored a bite of my sandwich, primarily due to her gaze upon me. After a moment, I spoke up. "You really don't have to go through with this." "What should I do?" she inquired, taking a sip of her iced tea. "Reach out to see how I'm doing. Please bring me some food. Behave as if I'm not a complete mess." Grace inclined her head just a touch, pondering my presence. "You are not a catastrophe. You're simply navigating a challenging moment." I let out a derisive laugh. "That's an understatement." She placed her drink on the table. "May I pose a question?" "To you?" I simply shrugged. "I suppose. Before everything unraveled, what brought you joy?" The inquiry took me by surprise. It had slipped from my mind for quite a while. I confessed that I was uncertain. I was constantly preoccupied with the need to demonstrate my worth. What is there to prove? I had value. Grace's brow furrowed ever so slightly. To whom? I parted my lips, yet silence enveloped me. Perhaps my parents? Me? My former spouse? For countless years, I pursued the elusive notion of success, challenging my boundaries, striving to embody the qualities that earn the respect of others. What comes next? At this moment, I found myself with nothing to display for my efforts. Grace refrained from pressing for a response. She allowed the silence to linger. After some time, she surveyed the apartment. "Now, let's move on to the third step." I traced her line of sight. The chaos lingered on. The bottles of beer, the laundry awaits, the pile of dishes rests in the sink. I let out a deep breath. It's quite substantial. "Begin with the little things," she advised with a straightforward tone. "Focus on one task at a moment." She rose from her slumber, strolled across the counter, and grabbed an empty beer bottle. She raised it, casting a glance my way. With a heavy sigh, I rose to my feet. All right, step by step. I began collecting bottles, discarding them into the waste bin. Grace provided assistance, making light-hearted remarks about how men often struggle with tidying up. It was cheerful and playful, simple. She was not present to pass judgment. "How long has everything been left here?" At one point she inquired, raising an unfilled takeout box. I simply shrugged. "Some time." She contorted her features. "Absolutely, no doubt about it." I had certainly seen the chaos before. I possessed. I simply didn't have the motivation to take any action regarding it. When we finished, the space wasn't flawless, but it certainly appeared improved. I brushed my hands against my jeans. Here, joyful. Grace smiled broadly, extremely. I shook my head, yet I felt no irritation. I felt somewhat more buoyant. She glanced at her watch. "I ought to take my leave." "I look forward to seeing you tomorrow." I scowled. "On the morrow? Unless you'd prefer to return to being isolated in your chaos." I felt compelled to decline. I wanted to express that I was perfectly capable of managing on my own. Yet, I discovered that I was nodding in agreement. "Very well, on the morrow." With a bright smile, she reached for her bag. "Excellent. Perhaps we can discuss what truly brings you joy tomorrow." I still haven't found an answer to that. For the first time in ages, I felt a strong desire to unravel it. The following morning, I awoke with a sense of uncertainty, unsatisfactory, yet not as burdensome as it once was. I turned onto my side and glanced at my phone, indulging in my usual habit. No word from my mom, no response from anyone. Truly. Aside from a single message. From Grace. Elegance. Good morning. Remember this. Today marks the 4th step. I will arrive at noon. I gazed at it for a moment, then placed my phone aside and let out a sigh. She was truly committed to this endeavor, truly staying in sync with me, ensuring I don't fall back into my familiar pattern of inaction. 4th step. Whatever that may have been. I reluctantly pulled myself from the comfort of my bed and stepped into the shower. It was only when I found myself beneath the cascading water that I understood just how much time had passed without any genuine intentions or aspirations. And at last, I possessed one. Precisely at noon, Grace rapped on my door. I opened it, anticipating yet another bag of food. But this time she was grasping something entirely different. Automobile keys. We're heading out, she announced. I blinked. Where exactly? Just wait and see. Let us proceed. I paused. Stepping out of my apartment felt like confronting the vastness of the world once more, and I questioned whether I was truly prepared for it. Just as I was about to concoct an excuse, Grace arched an eyebrow. Unless you'd prefer to waste another day gazing at the wall. A heavy sigh escaped me. All right. This had better not turn into one of those feel-good seminars. She chuckled softly. Absolutely not. Simply hop into the vehicle. 15 minutes later, we arrived at a serene park. It wasn't anything elaborate. A quaint little lake, meandering walking paths, and benches placed thoughtfully throughout. Yet the air felt invigorating, and for the first time in ages, I found myself free from the confines of those familiar 4 walls. Grace brought the vehicle to a stop and silenced the engine. Let's go. I trailed behind her to a bench by the water's edge. For a moment, we lingered in silence, observing the ducks gliding gracefully across the water's surface. What is the purpose of this? I ultimately inquired. Grace extended her legs leisurely. The goal is to help you escape that wretched apartment. I let out a derisive laugh. So what? Gaze intently at the ducks. She wore a sly grin. Indeed, it's important to keep in mind that life offers so much more than what's found at the bottom of a bottle. I released a gentle breath, observing the undulating patterns on the surface of the water. I'm uncertain, Grace. I sense that I've lost all the elements that defined who I truly am. She cast a fleeting look in my direction. You may have misplaced a few items, but your essence remains intact. You're still present. I hesitated to respond, immediately, as I genuinely questioned the validity of that statement. After a brief pause, Grace gently prodded my arm. Let's go. Join me on a stroll. I let out a deep sigh. Additional effort? This is really pushing my limits. She let out a dramatic sigh. Simply rise and shine. We began our stroll down the path, taking our time. I plunged my hands into my pockets, uncertain of how to express myself. Thus, Grace commenced, if you had the freedom to choose anything in this moment, what would you select? I scowled. What sort of inquiry is that? A significant one. I contemplated it. Yet, the reality was I was completely in the dark. I'm uncertain. I confessed. Once I had a multitude of plans laid out before me. Climb the ladder of success, generate income, create something that is uniquely mine. At this moment, envisioning next week feels impossible, much less contemplating what lies ahead. Grace fell silent for a moment. Then she remarked, Perhaps the issue isn't that you lost it all. Perhaps it's that you were pursuing the incorrect aspirations from the start. That struck me more deeply than I anticipated. We continued our stroll, and after some time, I broke the silence once more. How about yourself? If you had the chance to pursue any dream, what would it be? Grace offered a faint smile. To be frank, I have a strong desire to establish a bookstore. I was taken aback by that. A bookstore? She gave a slight nod. Indeed, a little something warm and inviting. A space for individuals to relax, immerse in literature, and engage in conversation. I have always had a passion for books since my childhood, yet I found myself in the corporate world instead. Covers the expenses, yet it doesn't ignite my enthusiasm. I gazed at her. What's stopping you from taking that step? She gave a slight shrug. Life often intervenes. Duties, apprehension about not succeeding. I allowed that to resonate within me. I used to believe that those older than me had everything sorted out. Yet perhaps no one truly did. After a few more moments, we settled onto another bench. Are you aware? She remarked. I once found myself in a chaotic state as well. I arched an eyebrow. And you? She let out a soft laugh. Indeed, my late 20s were quite tumultuous. Toxic connection, faced a job loss, found myself utterly immobilized. Yet I persevered, and thus shall you. I gazed at her, attempted to discern whether her words were mere rhetoric or if she genuinely held that belief. She appeared confident. For the first time in ages, I found myself wanting to embrace that belief as well. As Grace pulled up to my house, an unmistakable shift lingered in the air. My life remains a work in progress. A plan still eluded me. Today marked the first instance in quite a while where I sensed that perhaps, just perhaps, I could find my way back on track. Much of that was influenced by Grace. I found myself in my car, parked outside my mother's house, hands tightly clutching the steering wheel as I focused on calming my breath. This evening marked a significant moment. Grace and I have been together for 6 months now. We were both aware that this moment was inevitable. It was impossible to maintain the secrecy indefinitely. Yet that didn't simplify matters. I stole a quick look at Grace, who was sitting in the passenger seat. She appeared serene. Her hands lay gently in her lap. Yet I was familiar enough with her to notice the tightness in her shoulders. She felt the same flutter of nerves that I did. We still have the option to withdraw. I mentioned it, partly in jest. She cast me a sidelong glance. Oscar, we are well aware that this isn't a viable choice. A deep breath escaped me. Indeed, I'm aware. For a moment I thought about taking her hand, however I held back. We remained uncertain about my mom's reaction. I aimed to avoid complicating matters. I took a deep breath, swung the door wide, and ventured into the open air. Grace trailed behind. As we approached the front door, we walked side by side. As we entered, my mom was busy arranging the table for dinner. She pivoted at the sound of the door, a smile spreading across her face as she caught sight of me. "Oh, you finally decided to arrive on time," she playfully remarked. I then caught sight of Grace behind me. "So, you have someone with you?" A brief moment of silence lingered in the air, yet I sensed it. Grace and I shared a fleeting look. This was the moment. "Mother," I began with caution, "we have an important message to share with you." She arched an eyebrow, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Okay, I'm ready to listen." I paused, my heart racing within me. However, delaying would serve no purpose. Grace and I are united. In that instant, everything fell quiet. Just a brief moment, only a few seconds. Yet it seemed to stretch on endlessly. Then, my mom emitted a brief, perplexed chuckle. Quite amusing. I gulped. "I assure you I'm serious." Her smile dimmed. Oscar, could you clarify what you mean? I cast a quick look at Grace, who moved slightly ahead. Indeed, Agnes, she spoke softly. Oscar and I share a deep bond of care for one another. My mother's expression grew stern. Do we show concern for one another? She glanced in my direction. She is a dear friend of mine, Oscar. This isn't just an ordinary woman you encountered at a bar. I'm aware of that. She's nearly the same age as I am. A deep breath escaped my lips. She isn't, Mum. She is 45 years old. I am 32 years old. The gap isn't particularly large. She shook her head, her fingers weaving through her hair. This is absolutely wild. What is the duration of this situation? I paused, uncertain. Half a year. Her expression dimmed. Half a year? You've kept this from me for 6 months. Indeed, I acknowledged it. We anticipated your reaction would be just like this. My mom exhaled sharply, her fingers pressing against her temple. I find it perplexing. What led to this situation? I reflected on those initial weeks, when Grace had lifted me from my deepest despair, when she had shown me the essence of truly living once more. She stood by my side. In my darkest moments, when I felt utterly lost, she was there to help me rebuild myself. And I was captivated by her. It was unexpected. It simply occurred. My mother remained silent for an extended period. She then shifted her gaze to Grace. What about you? Do you really believe this is suitable? Grace held her gaze, unwavering. I'm aware that this might come as a surprise. I can see why you're feeling this way. However, your son is important to me. My feelings for him have grown deeper than I ever imagined they could. My mother let out a sigh, her head shaking in disbelief. Give me a moment. She entered the kitchen, leaving Grace and me behind. After a quarter of an hour, she returned. She noticed me first with her gaze. Do you find joy in your life? She inquired, her tone now subdued. I gave a slight nod. Absolutely I am. She cast a glance at Grace, her expression a mystery that defied interpretation. At last, she let out a deep breath. This is something I find difficult to grasp, and I won't act like I'm excited about it. Yet she massaged her forehead. You are both grown-ups. If this is your desire, I won't obstruct your path. I exhaled, unaware that I had been holding my breath. Thanks a lot. She raised a hand. However, I require some time. This is quite a bit to take in. I understand. Once more, she cast her gaze upon Grace. Please, do not cause him any harm. Grace offered a gentle smile. I shall not. As the night wore on and Grace and I made our way home, I allowed myself to unwind at last. That could have turned out more poorly, I murmured. She wore a sly grin. That could have turned out much more poorly. I extended my hand and grasped hers gently. We are truly embarking on this journey. She tightened her grip on my fingers. Indeed, we are. For the first time in ages, my future felt clear and assured. It seemed as though the journey had truly commenced. As I stood on the back porch of our new home, I savored my morning coffee while the sun gradually ascended above the horizon. The air was invigorating, infused with that ideal blend of warmth and coolness that heralded the arrival of early spring. The stillness enveloped the surroundings, broken only by the distant melody of a bird's chirp. A year ago, I couldn't have envisioned finding myself in this place. A year ago, I was indifferent to whether I would see another day. I savored another sip of coffee, feeling the comforting warmth envelop my chest, and cast a glance through the glass doors. Grace occupied the kitchen, a soft melody escaping her lips as she filled her cup with more coffee. She glanced upward, noticed my gaze, and offered a sly smile. Are you doing all right out there, or simply reflecting on existence? She playfully taunted. I let out a soft laugh, a blend of both. With a gentle shake of her head and a smile, she turned back to the counter. I rested against the railing, gazing out at the yard. A year ago, I found myself in a dilapidated apartment, without a job, engulfed in despair. And now I embarked on a new chapter in my career. A role that offered good compensation and brought me genuine satisfaction. I had moved beyond mere survival. I existed. It all stemmed from Grace. I reminisced about the evening she arrived at my doorstep. If she hadn't, what would my life look like today? Are you still feeling adrift? Am I still drowning my sorrows? Steering clear of calls from my mom? Shying away from existence? Would I truly exist in this moment? I dismissed the thought and took another sip of coffee, admitting that telling my mom had been the most challenging aspect. She required some time. Initially, she maintained her space, not from a place of anger, but rather from a sense of uncertainty. She was at a loss for how to make sense of it. Gradually, she began to warm up. She noticed the joy radiating from me, how significantly Grace had transformed me in a positive way. And one evening during dinner, she finally spoke the words. "I understand it now," she had said to me. "I perceive it. She enhances your qualities." And just like that, the burden had been released. Now my mom and Grace had improved their relationship significantly. They ventured out for coffee, reaching out to one another simply to converse. If someone had suggested to me a year ago that my mother would be chatting away on the phone with my girlfriend, I would have thought they were out of their mind. Yet here we found ourselves. I stepped back indoors, placing my empty cup in the sink. Grace glanced in my direction. "What do we have planned for today?" I let out a small shrug, contemplating the idea of simply savoring the day ahead. Without tasks, there's a sense of ease. Only we remain. She approached with a smile, drawing nearer. That resonates with me. I drew her closer, my arm encircling her waist. I softly said, "I realize I don't express this often, but I truly appreciate it." She inclined her head. "For what purpose?" "For all things." I let out a breath. For arriving at my doorstep that evening, for rescuing me from that pit, for reminding me that existence holds value. Her demeanor became gentler. "You've already tackled the toughest challenge, Oscar." I merely provided a gentle nudge. A smile graced my lips, a rather significant effort. She chuckled softly, leaning her head against my chest. For the first time in years, a profound sense of peace enveloped me, leaving no room for doubt. For I was acutely aware of my destined place.